So this is long form video, something I do in preparation for my shows, and the idea is that I just talk, and previously I've talked just into a tripod, but now I've got my gimbal. I'm going to use it, and so I'm going to talk about my show, and I'm going to start off, I think, with the beginning of my show, which is why now, why this, why me and why you. So why now? Well, we seem to be in a very interesting point when it comes to creativity and work and doing things. That kind of, there's this idea that everything is going to be completely taken over by AI and nobody's going to need to do anything anymore. And also we seem to be at this weird stage where it's very difficult to get paid for being creative. The British government seems to be bending over backwards, forwards, I don't know, bending over somehow towards tech in America, saying it's okay for you to steal all our, it is theft, there's no real other way of thinking about it, it's okay for you to steal all our creativity in training your AI models. So there is this kind of big question about what's the point in doing anything creative, and I think that just kind of like makes it even harder, and so that's why now I think that kind of, always there's some kind of need to explain what creativity. I kind of included this phrase, creativity and doing things, because I think like creativity, people imagine like, you know, something that involves your forehead scrunching up and kind of like being a tortured artist, and that's not exactly what I'm meaning. What I'm really meaning is kind of like anything that involves doing something that you haven't done before. So that's lots of things that we do at work. It's things like getting your kitchen redone, decorating your house, all sorts of things are included in what I'm thinking about. So that's kind of why now, and why this, why am I talking about the things that I'm talking about? Well, I think basically I've discovered a little thing that I haven't heard many people talk about. I mean, I'm sure there are people who have talked about it, but I've got a way of talking about it which I think is slightly different than others. And this is this thing that I've kind of tried to explain in the title as the biscuit tin and the biscuit. So the idea of the biscuit tin and the biscuit is that there's a difference between a description of something and the thing itself. And one of the things that I had this kind of dawned on me, and it dawned on me in a really kind of weird, nerdy way that, like, you know, don't run away when you hear this. But I was reading a book about a mathematician called Gödel. I can't remember his first name now, but basically he had this idea. It's something to do with numbers and the fact that some of the things that we know are true in a number system, it's very difficult for us to prove in that number system. So it's quite a nerdy thing. But one of the things that I read in this book, I'm not sure I really understand Gödel and his incompleteness theorem, but one of the things I read in this book was that it's important to understand that numbers and descriptions of numbers are different things. They're not the same kind of thing. And over the last 2 years, over longer than that, but kind of in the last 2 years I've kind of focused on finishing it. I've written a book called Delivering the Impossible, which is about project management. It's not so broadly about creativity and doing things, it's more focused on project management. And one of the things that I realised that kind of like connected together with what I've been writing about in this book, and this idea of descriptions of things and things not being the same, is that so many of the problems that you get in project management are to do with people essentially forgetting this distinction or having some kind of other problem with this distinction, that kind of descriptions of things, and also like ideas about things are not the same as the thing itself. They're not the same. And one of the things that it dawned on me was that, is that kind of when we actually do something and it kind of, we create something and then that thing has to function in the real world, then that thing that we've created, it has its kind of own rules. It has its own way that it needs to be looked after. It attracts its own criticism. It attracts sometimes expense. So when you make biscuits, kind of like you have to look after the biscuits. People eat your biscuits, they might like your biscuits, they might not like your biscuits. If you're sharing a house with a vegan and you use butter, it might attract criticism. So the thing itself has a kind of different set of rules for how it needs to be looked after, and ways in which it gets treated compared to the idea. And one of the things that I kind of started to realise about this is that, and this is again coming back to project management, but I think it applies to lots of different things, is when we do things, we experience emotions. And very often, we're not prepared for those emotions. We're not ready for those emotions. They're not the emotions that we think we're going to have when we do things. So one of the things, this is especially true if you're doing something completely brand new, where kind of, maybe the thing turns out to be harder than you expect it to be. Maybe it turns out to be more expensive than you thought it was going to be. Maybe people laugh at you and point at you. I mean, we've all had the experience of singing and somebody complaining about our singing and telling us to stop, or dancing and people pointing and laughing, or doing a drawing or not wanting to do a drawing because we're worried what people might say. So kind of this is kind of something that I started to realize is that, like, and it's not something that's discussed in the idea. So very often, like with project management, when people think about the project, they don't think about the emotional roller coaster that's going to be involved in actually implementing that idea. And it is a kind of like long process, and it doesn't happen in precisely the way that we expect. And because like the emotions that are involved aren't the ones that we think are going to happen, one of the things that can happen is that we can just give up. And another thing that can happen is that kind of we can just not be ready for, even if what happens is considered success, we can just not be ready for it because it's a different place than where we imagined. The idea, it's very easy to have ideas. It's not so easy to actually deal with the reality of what you've created, even if it's just a renovation of your kitchen. So that's the kind of why this is what I'm talking about. And now you might be wondering, why me? And I've said a kind of little bit about that kind of, I think, like, kind of, one of the kind of built-in assumptions about creating things and doing things is that you should know what you're doing, and you should be an expert. And so you might expect that somebody who is doing a Brighton Fringe show about creativity and how to do things should be an expert on creativity, and I'm not really. As I said, I've written this book, but it hasn't got a publisher yet. I've kind of created some other things, and I've abandoned some things. I've abandoned some quests. I'm 56 years old now. I've been trying to be a writer since I was 14, 15. I had ambitions to be a writer. And so kind of I've got some experience of kind of success, and I've also got some experience of struggling and not managing to succeed. But also, like, on top of that, I spent a lot of my professional life, as I mentioned, I'm trying to cross a road now, which is always a tricky business in London. As in my professional life, I started out as a software developer, and I ended up being a project manager. And so kind of I've been involved in big projects that maybe the people who were doing them initially didn't think they were creative. They didn't think there were any problems that needed to be solved creatively, but those projects did involve creativity, and they also involved in doing things, a lot of the things that I've talked about. So kind of they involved the whole business of experiencing problems or experiencing difficulties, things not turning out the way that they were expected to turn out, and then a kind of whole gamut of emotions around things not turning out as they were supposed to turn out. So that's kind of, those are my credentials. And the other reason, kind of why me, is because I found this out, I discovered this, and I want to explore it further. And one of the ways I find that it works to explore this further is to actually stand on a stage and talk about it. So I'm not doing that yet, but that's what I'm imagining I'll be doing in Brighton in the first instance. I'll be doing my one-man show in Brighton, and so it's kind of on the way to that. I'm talking about it. So that's me. Why should you care about what I'm talking about today? Well, I think that kind of, in my last show last year, I said there were 3 different groups of people, because last year's show was about software development particularly. One was people who write software, and the other one was people who need to use software, and the third was everybody else. But I think with this show, I think the kind of main audience is everybody, because I think we all at some point have to do things, and very often those things are things that we haven't done before, and when we do things that we haven't done before, we experience all sorts of unexpected emotions. And really what I'm talking about in this show is explaining why that's the case, that we don't really understand the emotions that we have when we do things and things don't go the way that we expect them to, and then also explaining what there is that we can do about that, so that we can do more things, so that we can take things further, so that we can take them to the point of some kind of success. And also, I suppose the other thing that's quite important is understanding when to decide, actually, well, no, I'm going to rely on what my emotional response to this is, and I'm not going to take it any further. I'm not going to do this anymore. So that's the journey that we're going to take over 45 to 50 minutes of a performance. And so there are various aspects of this that kind of I've put in my notes, and I'm going to cover, and I'm going to try and remember them now. And I think kind of part of the challenge here is if I can remember them, then that helps, because they can go into the show. One of those is something called emotional labour. So I read this fantastic book by a woman called Arlie Russell Hochschild. I think that's not super confident about the pronunciation at the end there. And basically the point of the book is that a lot of the work that we do, if we have a job where, especially jobs that are in the service industry in any kind of way, this is like doctors and waitresses and all sorts of other people, a lot of the work that we do is essentially having one emotion but presenting another emotion. And this is work. And one of the interesting things that I read about this just recently was that there's some research to indicate that if you're just faking it, if you're not actually cheerful when you're dealing with customers, even when they're difficult, or you're not actually calm when you're a doctor, even though things are going wrong, if there is a kind of disparity between your internal emotions and your external emotions, that ultimately becomes exhausting, and and it results in also in the kinds of stress that people are almost always suffering with from jobs. And the way to deal with this, the way to get around this, is actually to come up with ways of seeing the behaviour that you're dealing with. That means that you're essentially not wrong-footing your emotions. You're having the right kind of emotions, and I'm intrigued to know more about that in terms of waitressing and doctors and all sorts of other professions. But also, I think that it's interesting from the point of view of creativity and doing things, and also the point of view of how you might help yourself to kind of carry on doing something new and original, carry on doing something different. And it might be that but there's another aspect to this, which is that if that's true, if the two things that I'm saying are true, that kind of when you do something creative, when you do something different, when you have to do something that you haven't done before, there's a good chance that it's going to result in negative emotions, and your first kind of reaction to those negative emotions is probably going to be, well, don't do that then. It's a very, very old doctor's joke, isn't it? Doctor, every time I do this, my hand hurts, and the doctor says, well, don't do that then. Like most of the jokes that are kind of very, very old, it talks about something that's really, really very pertinent, which is this is something that we do, and we often do it almost without thinking. If we do something, we try some kind of new activity and it's unpleasant, we don't necessarily think to ourselves, okay, well, I'm never doing that again. We might say that, we might say it out loud, but also there's a good chance we're just kind of going to quietly not do it. And then, maybe there's going to be very initial bits of feedback are worthwhile and helpful, and we shouldn't do it again. But also, what I'm kind of saying is, for anything that you're going to do that's going to be worthwhile, at some point you're going to have some negative emotions. And so then the kind of question is, if you're going to have those negative emotions, then what you've done is essentially you've given yourself emotional work. You're going to have to do some emotional work to get through this. And there are different ways of doing it. You can front it out with gritted teeth, which is the kind of waitress who hates being a waitress, kind of pretend smiling. Or you can actually come up with a way of thinking about creativity, a way of thinking about doing things that gives you a better way of dealing with when things are going badly and when things are going negative. And but it's important, I think, to understand that what you've done is essentially by doing something creative, you've probably got some kind of idea of how this will be really positive and helpful, and how it'll be great if you can do this creative thing and it pays off. And you've probably got some kind of climactic moment that you're imagining, that you're playing the piano at a concert and everybody applauds, or you're standing on stage and telling a joke and everybody laughs, or whatever it is. But essentially what you're doing on the way to that is you're buying yourself, by acting, you're buying yourself a bunch of negative emotions, and the only way to deal with those is emotional work. Now, does this actually cheer anybody up? That's the next question, I suppose. I think it does, because I think it makes it kind of easy to explain why so many people give up things. They start things and then they give them up, and it's a way of explaining why people start things and give them up that doesn't have to kind of reach for people being lazy or apathetic or feckless or any of those kinds of things, because it's a perfectly rational response to the kind of negative feelings that you encounter at some point. But also it's kind of maybe a way of getting through and carrying on making progress with things even after you felt badly about them, and even after you've given them up. So one of the things that I was thinking about doing at this point in the show was asking people about things that they've taken up and then things that they've given up. But before I do that, so like you can tell this is the first time I've done this, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hero's journey, and also because it seems a bit sexist to just talk about the hero's journey. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the heroine's journey as well. And so if we talk about the heroine's journey, is basically, there are lots and lots of different paths through this, but the most basic kind of heroine's journey is that the heroine is at home in the village, and the village is a nice, safe place. And then for some reason, she has to leave the village. She has to go somewhere. She has to go on a quest. So very often what happens is some other people turn up and say, you're the only person who can go to this other place and fight these people, or save this thing, or kind of bring back this thing that's really important to our civilization. You're the only person that can do it. You're the chosen one. And so off she goes, and very often she sets off with some people who are accompanying her, and she meets some other people on the way, and she encounters lots of challenges, and at various points it looks like she's going to despair. But she doesn't despair, and she loses some of these people that she picks up on the way, and it's all very sad, and at that moment she's kind of very upset. And then through a bunch of challenges and bravery and magic and whatever, she gets to the thing that she needs to get to. She kills the baddie who she needs to kill. She rescues the magic whatever, and then she brings it back to her nice village, and she has a very nice tea. And this is a kind of basic story and it's basically this idea that we start off on this quest and we encounter these challenges, and then through these challenges we get to the end. But one of the things that I've kind of realised by talking about this and by thinking about this is that I'm starting to be kind of quite distrusting of stories, because of course this isn't the story that most of us have with a lot of the challenges that we face in life. We start on our quest, and then for various reasons we just don't get as far as we'd like to get with these quests. We get stopped for some reason, and I think one of the, as I said, like kind of understanding that kind of once you're on a quest there's a whole bunch of effort needs to be involved in it, I think might help. I think that really might help. And you might ask, well, why all of a sudden in your 50s, it's a personal thing, why all of a sudden in your 50s have you managed to finish a book when previously you didn't manage to finish a book? So why did you manage to finish your quest this time when previously you didn't manage to finish it? And I think there are three important reasons why I've managed to do it this time and I haven't done it in the past. And one of them is, it's a really, really obvious one, and I think it's an important one to mention, is I have more time. I'm only working part-time at the moment, and so I have the luxury of working some of the time in Greece. And when I'm in Greece, my work doesn't start until 11 o'clock. And that means that I can get up in the morning, go and sit in a cafe and write for a couple of hours if I want, before kind of I have to kind of like go and then earn my living, which is brilliant. There's no doubt about it. That's brilliant. And it's an amount of time that I have spare. Previously, in other parts of my life, I've had to commute to an office every day, and I just haven't had that kind of time, and especially I haven't had that time at the point in the day when I really need time, because I'm not somebody who can really work in the evenings. I need, the only chance that I have of like writing things and thinking and my brain actually functioning is first thing in the morning. And so I think that's kind of one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that I found a friend who was prepared to read things that I wrote, like almost no matter how bad they are, which is just absolutely fantastic. And I found him absolutely by accident. I wasn't looking for somebody to do this, and partly because like getting somebody to read your writing is pretty difficult. People don't really want to do that, and so he kind of wanted somebody to read his stuff, and so we started doing it reciprocally, and I found that kind of focusing on an audience, even if it's an audience of one, really helped. And then there's a final thing, which is, I think, kind of the thing that I'm not going to end on, but it's definitely part of it. It's an important part of it, which is that I stopped trying so hard. I think kind of one of the things that about struggling to write all these years was I would read something that would say something like write every day, and writing every day is a great thing to do. But also I would then say, okay, well, I'm going to write 1,000 words a day, and you can probably keep that up. I think the longest I've kept it up for is probably about 20-25 days, but it's a crazy pace. And one of the things I'm going to do when I'm doing this show in reality, rather than just wobbling down the Thames in this absolutely beautiful weather, is I'm going to do a demonstration of what my power is. And I'll tell you now about what that is, and then just for the completeness and to give me an idea of like how much time this performance is actually going to take. And so the kind of demonstration of power is basically that, you know, I'm quite a fat man. I'll say it so you don't have to. So my power, if you don't know what power is, if you haven't done GCSE or O-level physics, power is work divided by time. So power is the amount of work that you can do in a given time. And if we talk about this as in terms of physical work, work is force times distance travelled. So I exert a force on the floor, and in newtons that's 10 times kilograms, because the metric system works perfectly. And the distance I travel, I'm going to use this chair, and I'm going to step up and down off this chair as many times as I can in 30 seconds. And so like when I'm doing this in the theatre, what I'll do is I'll get somebody from the audience to time me for 30 seconds, and then I'll get the rest of the audience to count how many times I can step up and down off of this chair in 30 seconds. And I'll tell you now that the answer is going to be about 13 or 14 times in 30 seconds. So about once every 2 seconds that I can step up and down off of this chair, depending on how high the chair is. And so then at the end of this activity, because I'll probably take my shoes off to do it so I don't dirty the chair, I'll be sitting on the chair, I'll be out of breath, and I'll ask the audience, and I'll say, so that's my power, is 13 step-ups. and steps down in 30 seconds. So that's probably about 25, 24 in a minute. If somebody were to say to me, well, we think you should be able to do 24 in 30 seconds, what should my response be? So my response should be that I can't do that. If I've got an idea of my power, if I've got an idea of how long it takes me to do things, then I should know that that's ridiculous. I can't do 26 of these things in 30 seconds. And if it was somebody were to force me into doing it, then I'd probably have to do something like lie or fake injury or just give up and go away. And so you can see how this does fit with what I was just saying about the idea of writing 1,000 words a day, that if you start off with ridiculous ambitions, then it's very easy to just disappoint yourself and then give up. And so one of the things that's kind of happened recently is that I haven't set myself ridiculous goals. I've set myself achievable goals. And the other thing is that I've kept going. So of course, that kind of 13 ups and downs in 30 seconds, if I was going to aim to do it for longer, like let's say if I was going to aim to do it for hours, then that wouldn't be the pace that I would set myself. I would look for a different pace. And again, this is a very important thing for the aspect of creativity and doing things, is that you need to be able to set the right kind of pace. And of course it takes a while to find that kind of pace. It's very difficult initially to know, and not doing anything at all is not enough, and probably 1,000 words a day is too much. So you've got to be very careful to make sure that it's part of what you need to do if you're going to do things, is to understand what is a decent pace. Now, the other thing that I really struggled with, and it's really helped me having somebody to talk to and having somebody to write with, is that all the books that I've read anyway about writing say that it's important to write every day. And very, very few of them talk about the business of editing, and that's a bit that I found really difficult. It's something actually I don't find anywhere near as difficult, and I've sort of turned everything into editing, rather than thinking I'm just going to generate some text. I just think I'm just going to kick around this chapter a bit, and that helped. But then upset the gimbal somehow there. But then there's something else here, which is, this is like connected to the idea of the biscuit tin and the biscuit, is that once you've made the biscuits, you need to look after them, and maybe you need to market them, or maybe you need to decorate them, or you need to write allergy advice for them, all sorts of things, right? So the thing is that once you've got a biscuit, once you've got a thing, there are all these other things that you need to do in support of your biscuit. And this is the interesting thing. Maybe you don't know how to do any of those things. So you started out getting really excited about generating biscuits, about making biscuits. You're very excited about that. But then all of this other stuff that you might have to do in order to be a success at making biscuits, maybe you don't know anything about those things at all. And again, this is very often what the emotion that I experience when I'm talking about this is shame. I feel ashamed that I don't know, for example, whether it's going to be a problem publishing my book that I've already published it online. I feel ashamed that I don't really know how to do marketing for a show. I feel ashamed, not ashamed. And so kind of, and one of the kind of like perfect examples of this from last year when I did a show in Edinburgh. So last year I did a show in Brighton as my first Fringe show, and then I did another follow-up show in Edinburgh, which wasn't my first Edinburgh Fringe show. I'd done one in 1989 when I was a student, but let's not talk about that. But one of the first things I had to do when I got to the venue in Edinburgh was to have a technical rehearsal, and I got very, very worried about this. I got worried about this idea of this technical rehearsal because I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and I was thinking, oh God, am I going to have to use lighting terms? Am I going to have to kind of tell them, in some kind of special language, how I want the stage to look? All I really wanted was a kind of standard stand-up comedy setup. I didn't really want anything that was different than that, but I was kind of anxious about all of these things. And then, of course, it was like one of these things that kind of, again, it was like, if at that point somebody said, oh, it's okay, you don't have to go, you don't have to do the technical rehearsal, and then you don't have to do the show, I'd have been almost tempted to say, well, great, because then I can avoid doing this good awful technical rehearsal that I don't know what it is. And then, of course, when I went, it wasn't that big a deal at all. I just said to them, well, this is what I want. I want to set up this pretty much like a stand-up comedy setup in terms of lighting. I said, do you have any music you'd like to play? I said, yes, I do. I have some music I'd like to play. And so we sorted out plugging my phone in so I could play my music. And that was it. And I would like to be kind of more ambitious with my staging in future and kind of maybe have a lighting cue or a sound cue. I'd like to do something a little bit more complicated. But see, again, like I'm kind of feeling kind of slightly embarrassed. It's a different emotion. I'm admitting that I felt ashamed about this, but I think lots and lots of people feel embarrassed and ashamed and also some negative emotions when they start doing something new and they don't expect. Now I'm kind of expecting it. I'm expecting to kind of be humiliated in some way along the way to kind of making my shows work. I've had problems. The venue promoter, he's got some special rules on how he wants to use Instagram, and I feel like 200 years old that I don't really know how to make my Instagram posts comply with his instructions, and I need to have another go at that. And the same with this gimbal that I'm using now. I know that I don't know how to use it perfectly, and I'm struggling with it, but I'm kind of carrying on with it rather than just I was very tempted when I bought it to just put it down. So where were we? So yes, I think there's a difference. This is the thing, this important thing. There's a difference between regularly struggling and then improving slowly, and just either trying really, really hard for a short while and then giving up, which kind of is not a great strategy. Or another thing is just pretending you're doing this thing but not doing it at all. So telling everybody, and I've done this for years, telling everybody that you're a writer, telling everybody that you want to be an actor, whatever it is, some kind of creative endeavour that you want to do, and then just not doing it at all. And even worse, I suppose, is pretending to do it. And what I thought I was going to do at this point in the show, and it's interesting to talk about it and realise that maybe it's not going to work, but maybe we can fit it in and something called agreed activity. So agreed activity is basically it's something that I take from improvised theatre. It's a guru of improvised theatre called Keith Johnston. And kind of the example I give when I talk about this is I've done improv courses. I've lived in North London, and so I have done an improv course. I think those are the rules. And he talks about like improvisers doing a scene where they're all members of the crew of a ship, and somebody puts a telescope to their eye and says, "Oh look, there's a pirate ship coming," and what this is called in improv terms is making an offer. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to advance the story, which is exactly what you should do in these kinds of situations. And also, like, the interesting thing about this offer is it comes with a load of baggage, right? So kind of once everybody else on the stage accepts this offer, then you want to see people kind of panicking because the pirates are on their way. You want them maybe to think about hiding in the lifeboats and then find out that there aren't lifeboats. You want them maybe to kind of pull the cannon out and not really know how to use the cannon and accidentally drop the cannonball on the toe or all that kind of stuff, right? So you want that kind of stuff to happen. Once you've kind of like set up the idea of the pirate ship, you want the performers on the stage to deal with the pirate ship. And then at some point you want the pirate ship to turn up, right? So you don't want somebody to kind of look through their telescope and go, "Oh, it's gone away," right? So you want the kind of final encounter with the pirates to happen, right? So kind of this is kind of doing some kind of activity that moves the story forward. Now, what Keith Johnston noticed was that some people they don't do that. They don't do the kind of activities that move the story forward. So somebody might say something like, "Well, let's scrub the decks." And scrubbing the decks kind of sounds like it's an activity, but in fact it's not. It's kind of not really. It's not moving the story forward. It's just boring. But for the actors who were on the stage, who were kind of dreading having to think through the whole business of dealing with pirates, etc., it's safe. It's a safe thing. And very often what you see is, if somebody suggests this, then everybody will kind of agree, and that's why it's called agreed activity. But the interesting thing from the point of view of creativity and doing things, that everything has its own pace, and so kind of like in improvised theatre, you need to be kind of making suggestions and moving the story forward like every few seconds. But kind of lots and lots of kinds of activity have a version of agreed activity. And I know about this from writing because I've done that for 20, 30 years. That I've sat in coffee shops and written things, and I've not tried to get those things to find publishers. I've not tried to get those things. I've not edited those things. I've not gone back and looked at them. And you can see how this is really kind of a tricky thing, because the difference between agreed activity and genuine activity might be very, very difficult to spot. Maybe the only people who can really see it are the people who are doing it. And maybe, I mean, as I'm writing this, talking this, whatever it is, presenting this, I'm thinking to myself, is that what you're doing when you're just kind of posting the odd little thing on LinkedIn and not really trying to market your show? Is that what you're doing? Is that just agreed activity? And I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think it's a good question to ask. It's like, you know, what's the next step I could do to kind of, you know, advance the story of my marketing on LinkedIn and Facebook? And maybe that involves paying some people to do some stuff for me. Maybe it involves doing more stuff. But then again, I kind of think, you know, kind of there's a temptation to just say, oh, I'll post every day, or I'll post 3 times every day, or whatever it is, and then just set up a kind of cadence for that is just not achievable, and then give up. So this is kind of not something that it's easy to do. And it's interesting just walking through this and talking about it for the first time, how I've realised that there are kind of some examples from my own career, is that the word, that I can use. And I'm trying to think what order these things come in, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to end on this idea that I get from a completely disreputable source. It's a chap called Richard Bandler who was responsible for something called neuro-linguistic programming. Lots of people think everything about neuro-linguistic programming is absolute bollocks, but I'm just going to end with an exercise that he talks about, which is basically is to kind of get you to that next step, like to kind of get you out of whatever kind of agreed activity that you're in at the moment, and into the kind of next thing that is actually going to advance the story forward. And the thing to think of is to think about the thing that you're going to do next, and feel yourself hesitating to do it. Feel yourself thinking about doing this thing and then not doing it, and really feel that. So, like, kind of, if you kind of put a number on how much hesitation you feel about this thing, and then kind of turn that kind of hesitation up until it's like at 10. Like, what's that hesitation feel like when it's at 10? And then when you're kind of like hesitating, like to the absolute maximum, can you feel frustration that you're hesitating, that you're not moving forward, that you're not doing this thing? And again, like, how much frustration are you feeling? And if you could give that a number on a dial, kind of like, where is it? And then kind of start to turn up that frustration so that you're now at, so like, we started at 5, now you're 6, and then you moved up to 7, and now you're 8. You're frustrated. You're at 8 in frustration, and then you move up to 9. You're so frustrated that there's this thing that you want to do, and you just can't do it. And then finally, just like knock that up to 10 and kind of maybe 11. And when it gets to 11, just realise that now you're impatient. You've just had it. You've had it. There's this thing that you obviously know you need to do, but you're not doing it, and you're very frustrated about it. And now you're impatient. You're thinking, well, why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing this thing that I know is the thing that I should be doing to move my get forward and step? And then, having done that, feeling those impatience, what you're going to do now is feel what the number is on that impatience, and then just turn that up. So if it's from 5 it goes to 6, from 6 it goes to 7, 7 it goes to 8, and then from 8 it goes from 9 until absolutely super impatient. And then the thing is to do is the way to get rid of that maximum impatience is to just fucking do it. Is to just go, fuck it, I'm going to do this. This thing that I need to do to move myself to the next level, to move myself on from where I am just going to fucking do it. I've had it. I am just going to do it.